Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And this fortnight we are diving into a bit of nostalgia for our own younger years with X-Men 97, the revival of the classic superhero cartoon, and then a bit of adaptation nostalgia for something that I've never actually played, I guess. It's Fallout, the Amazon Prime series adapting the popular video games. But before all of that, Alistair, what else have you consumed in the last fortnight?
Well, I went to the cinema, no surprises there, to see a new film that's causing some waves, which is Challengers, which is, a new film set in the world of tennis, about the rivalry between two tennis stars for the affections of a female tennis star played by Zendaya. And yeah, this film's getting a lot of attention, mainly because it's really, really good. It's very, very tense. It manages to successfully, get you invested in the character drama so that when it comes down to tennis matches, it makes the matches very, very tense. The sort of high energy back and forth of the tennis. Yeah, they managed to turn that into, sort of some very, very tense drama. Yeah, which works well, partly because they spend the time building up the characters and getting you invested in their story, how they were friends, then they met a girl and then they became rivals. It's a story as old as time, but this time told through the world of tennis, and it helps. The three main stars have a lot of chemistry. You can really believe in their this sort of rivalry, and also it's got a great soundtrack that really again ramps up the tension as well. So I can strongly recommend this film.
It's Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross again, isn't it? The soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, always great soundtracks. I've got a lot of their soundtracks on my writing playlist. I do like their kind of like weird ambient music they do for films. And this one's is very, very good. What they've done is in the background there's this little, I think it's like a snare drum, and they've done it something so it sounds just like a little bit like a tennis ball hitting a racket. So in the background there's this kind of drum beat that kind of sounds like the back and forth of like a tennis ball. Just a little touches like that. I really appreciate, which you can tell more when you listen to the soundtrack after seeing the film.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot of good things about this film. Actually, I listened to the episode of the Overinvested podcast the other day where they were very much singing the praises of this. It's fun rivalries, it's gorgeous looks, it's sexiness. They seemed all in on it.
Yeah, it's definitely a sexy film, which is one of the reasons why I can recommend it. Everyone in it is very good looking. Everyone in it's got great chemistry. And there has been quite a lot of, quite sexless blockbusters in recent years. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, especially the 80s, there were some incredibly horny, like, mainstream films. It just seemed to be the done thing. And I don't know, I guess maybe things move in and out of fashion, but, it's been often pointed out, and I'm not the first one to say this, that, our kind of reigning franchises are, although full of very good-looking people, surprisingly, like, low on sex. There's even some films that even like you sort of cut away from like characters kissing and things like that. So the fact that this film is that's basically putting its sexiness front and center is a refreshing change.
No, I've definitely heard that about it, and obviously Zendaya continues to have a moment. She's possibly very close to being one of these movie stars who we sometimes hear are becoming an endangered species. Someone who could just sell a movie on while Zendaya's in it.
Yeah, that's pretty much the selling point of this film, other than, it's got the buzz that it's good. Zendaya's the most famous person in it. The other two tennis stars, one of them was in West Side Story and one of them was Prince Charles in The Crown. So, obviously people who've done stuff, but then, they're not as famous as she is. So she is definitely the draw here. And she does an amazing performance, quite a complex character. She's incredibly talented, just reminding me of like how she like stole the show in Spider-Man Homecoming, fantastic in Euphoria, fantastic in June. So yeah, she's really talented. This is a great vehicle for her. I think it's the first film she's produced as well. So she's clearly like the driving creative force behind the film, along with the director. So it's part of her brand. She does more stuff like this, then she's got a strong career ahead of her.
Well, I guess it's nice to see her, clearly in a very pre-planned way, trying to drive forward using the success she's had starring in franchise stuff to make films like this, which is obviously probably the best thing to do with it.
Yeah, this is like a film that's kind of hers in her own right. You're not playing like a character like MJ from Spider-Man, Chani from June. It's part of a bigger franchise and has been done various times in the past, and there's all these other versions and interpretations out there, taking the popularity of that, put it towards your own projects. Obviously, Euphoria was great, but it really is the creative vision of, I've forgotten his name, the guy who like wrote it and did Assassination Nation. So this is her putting her creative stamp on something. Like I say, along with other talented people like the director. We discussed the soundtrack, but she is kind of the core of this film and really entertaining.
I mean, she was probably one of the best parts of Euphoria as well. That show was entertaining, but occasionally a bit uneven. But Zendaya was always good.
Yeah. I mean, obviously people like Sydney Sweeney, other people in the film are very talented, but yeah, that film wouldn't have been the hit it was without Zendaya as the main character. And I loved her in the Spider-Man films as well. But, yeah, I just want to add one thing. Isn't it strange do people who play Spider-Man's love interest do a tennis film afterwards? Kirsten Dunst, after being the Tobey Maguire ones, did Wimbledon. Then Emma Stone, after being in the Andrew Garfield one, did that Battle of the Sexes. And now Zendaya's done this. I know that's like 3 tennis films in 20 years isn't much, but all of them following Spider-Man films?
Okay, I remember the Kirsten Dunst one, but I didn't realise that Emma Stone had also taken to the court.
Yeah, no.
Okay, fine.
It's a pattern.
The Spider-Man tennis pipeline is real. Fair enough.
Yeah. I don't know. It's only happened 3 times, but it's an oddly specific thing to have happened 3 times.
Who knows? But yeah, I'm glad this is good. It looks fun.
Yeah, it seems to be generating a lot of word of mouth buzz. Social media podcasts saying this is good. Go see it. It's definitely one of the strongest films I've seen so far this year. Probably will be in the top 5, although it's early days yet. We're not even halfway through the year. It's got great chemistry. It's got lots and lots of tension. It's one of those films that takes you into a world that I didn't really know much about or particularly care about, and then gets you very invested in the rivalries and the drama of it. So, yeah, if it's still in the cinema near you, I recommend checking it out.
Nice.
Cool. So that's what I've been up to since we last spoke. Nick, what about yourself?
Well, actually, a bit of a bonus MFV review here, I guess, in that I went out and saw Love Lies Bleeding, a new thriller directed by Rose Glass and starring Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien, and Alistair also came and saw it with me, so we will both be able to have opinions about this. But yeah, this is about Kristen Stewart as Lou, a gym manager who finds herself falling for one of the patrons at her gym who is training for an upcoming bodybuilding contest, only for them to get dragged into an underground world of steroids and the crime business of Lou's father, who is a local gangster who runs a gun range. And yes, it pretty much goes from there into a dark world of violence and revenge and magical realism. And yeah, it's a good film, this. It's very escalatingly strange. Like, for the first third to half, I guess it probably is a relatively straightforward sort of crime thriller. Sort of romantic crime thriller, or again, even a sexy crime thriller. Some good sex here in the recommendation section. And over the course of the second half or so, it gets steadily more sort of exaggerated and strange, a little bit more leaning on the sort of dark comedy elements. There's a character who is, for lack of a better word, a complete idiot, who turns up very, very briefly towards the beginning of the film and then plays an increasingly large role in the plot as it goes along. And yeah, it's just impressive how, as they get towards the final confrontation of the film, this increasing amount of screen time for this complete moron. Yeah, and then at the end, it just go even stranger. So yes, it's a good film. It's an odd film. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it combines its various elements of crime, dark comedy, and occasionally weird shit in a way that I found extremely compelling.
Yeah, I thought this was great as well. It's very stylish thriller, dark comedy, as you say. Yeah, it kind of moves from some quite tense, very, very serious bits into some bits that are kind of quite funny, and as well as having moments that are kind of quite surprising and shocking. In that sense, it kind of reminded me of quite a lot of the Coen brothers films. They do quite a lot of arty rural crime films, which this is quite similar. So a film such as No Country for Old Men or Blood Simple, the original Coen brothers film, kind of that similar sort of vibe in that there's some quite serious crime going on, but there's also a few quite absurd characters who punctuate the tension with moments of humour, which is a winning combination.
Yeah, and the other elements in this film, which I guess you could file under weird shit, but I'm going to break it out into its own section, is this sort of soft undercurrent of body horror. As I say, the bodybuilder character gets sort of increasingly stuck into sort of steroids as the film goes along, and there's this sort of real, occasional, increasingly sort of weird, queasy shots of rubbery muscle filling the screen and undulating and expanding and in increasing ways as the film goes along, in ways which, yeah, it's just a little unsettling. It makes all these rubbery noises. As Alistair said, it's a very stylish film. It's very visceral, and yeah, this stuff especially. It's another odd element which goes well with the whole.
Yeah, any sort of other film, like a less well-made film, would have just not had this in it, because, yeah, you could have done a film about people in the bodybuilding world in the 80s getting hooked on steroids, but to have these weird sections of the muscles flexing and things like that, it kind of adds this kind of, again, this arty, quite distinctive element of visual flair to the film. They do quite a lot of tricks, I think, involving sets and camera angles, so that the sort of size of one of the main characters, the one who's the bodybuilder, as you say, played by Katie M. O'Brien, that you're not really sure like how big she is. Sometimes she looks like larger than life, and they kind of move things around again, doing these visual tricks to make things just look a little bit odd and a little bit out of proportion. And then that comes to a head at the end of the film with a sort of linking it with the magical realism moments. And and all those little things are kind of like the sort of ways that it's visually distinctive and interesting and unusual, and more than just it's more than just another gritty crime film set in New Mexico ripping off Breaking Bad. It's got this kind of very much style of its own.
Yeah, and it feels very, I don't know, very unique and very hard to pin down. Like, there was definitely a lot of times in this film where I really didn't have a clue what was going to happen next. And when it did unveil its next twist, it was always entertainingly silly or out of left field.
Yeah, it was one of those films where I really couldn't tell where the plot was going, from the beginning. It starts out again with like two people meet, they become lovers, they get involved in crime. But the directions it just shoots off in are quite unexpected. They get quite a few twists in for a film that's kind of a tight 1 hour 40 minutes.
Yeah, it feels very expansive for the time. Like, because I'm the sort of person who is interested in this sort of thing, looked up the running time before I went to see it, and it was like, yeah, okay, this is not that long, over 90 minutes, but it felt longer while I was watching it, but not in a bad way. It really felt like they've crammed a lot in.
Yeah. And also, it must be said that Ed Harris as the villain is great. I mean, he's been in so many films over the years, done so many villains. He really excels in this kind of like small town, badass, weirdo, creepy dude. But yeah, he is great in this kind of role, and just good to see him still doing it, still cranking out the excellent performances. I mean, I do want to obviously shout out that both Kirsten Stewart and Katie M. O'Brien are great as the two main characters. They've got great chemistry together. You really get invested in their relationship. So I don't want to just praise Ed Harris. So really the whole core cast are doing great work here, making some career-defining performances.
Yeah, Kirsten Stewart especially is, her role has a lot more to it than it first seems, and it unfolds in a very sort of watchable, dramatic, understandable way. It's a very good performance.
Yeah. This is another film that's hit cinemas right now that's sort of similar to Challengers, come out of left field a bit. There wasn't a huge amount of build-up. It wasn't one of the big ones to watch this year. So, one of the ones that are hotly tipped, like Furiosa, for example, which we'll probably be discussing in the next episode. Yeah, it's always good when something comes along, something slightly unusual. I don't think it's based on a famous novel or anything like that. So, something comes along slightly unusual, grabs attention, mainly for being good, and becomes a talking point for a bit.
Yeah, this is really good. If you can get a hold of this in your local cinema, or I don't know, I imagine it'll turn up on streaming eventually. Yeah, very enjoyable. It's a film 4 movie, so it might even be available on 4OD in Britain, who knows.
Yeah, and it's been out for a while, and this Friday night cinema screening, I guess in London, was pretty full, I must say, actually. So I think it's just there's been a lot of buzz about this film, so people are still going to see it because they want to see what the buzz is about.
Yeah, it was full, and full of people who were beforehand quite loud and chatty and possibly slightly drunk, but to their credit, did immediately shut up when the film started.
Yeah.
And then immediately start yelling again as soon as it finished, which either speaks to the quality of the film or just these people being very polite.
Yeah, well, they seem to be into it. They seem to be in the end shouting about, like, man, that was crazy, sort of thing.
It held the drunken Friday Night London audience.
Next up, this episode, we will be discussing X-Men 97, a new animated show on Disney Plus that picks up where the classic 90s X-Men animated series left off. Following the death of Charles Xavier, the X-Men are surprised to learn that Professor X has willed his school to Magneto to carry on his legacy. However, there are more threats facing the X-Men, including a virus from the future, Storm losing her powers, and a new generation of Sentinels led by the mysterious Bastion. We've seen the complete new series of this old show. Nick, what did you think of it?
Part of me always finds better than it needed to be. A bit backhanded as a critical remark, a bit damning with faint praise. But as the kids say, this did not need to go so hard. It could have just been, easy, fun nostalgia. But instead, this is really, really good. This is possibly one of the best X-Men adaptations anyone's done, and a reasonable contender for one of the better superhero TV shows of recent years. This is really good. It does a good job, I think, of slightly advancing the target demographic of the show. I don't think this is making it into a full adult show or anything. This isn't hardcore adult content. But I think they've pushed it slightly from a show aimed at kids to a show aimed at teenagers who like anime, maybe people who liked Invincible. And yeah, there's a lot to like here. They tackle the social justice aspects of X-Men, and they do some of the fun, less obvious stuff that often gets ignored in favour of endless reprises of Sentinels and Magneto and Xavier arguing. But yeah, we've got some Apocalypse, some Phoenix, fun aspects like Mr. Sinister, Mojo, and a bird-shaped demon, and Bastion, who, by the way, was a bit of an unsuccessful villain in the comics, but he's far cooler here than he was in any of those appearances. So yeah, no, this was really enjoyable. This really felt like a good, again, much like I've said about Invincible, a really good, high-quality adaptation of the sort of superhero ongoing series. It really felt like it put together a world and kept its storyline spinning with verve.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and want to add that I really enjoyed it. Yeah, this is more than a nice piece of nostalgia, which is what it could quite easily have been. It's like, I remember that show with the iconic theme people used to like on Saturday morning cartoons. Well, yeah, here's some more of it. You know, fill your boots of your nostalgia vibes that millennials are into. But no, actually, they really try to make this, a show that has its plot in its own right, and yeah, it is just a good quality thing to watch. So yeah, the plot's very engaging. I got completely wrapped up in it. I did watch the show when it was on TV back in the 90s, but I haven't revisited it since. Although I did watch a YouTube Catch Me Up primer filling in the plot of the previous 5 seasons, that were screened in the 90s. This being like pitched as the 6th. That was actually useful. Yeah, you might have found it a bit confusing if you never watched this show before, or like me, you haven't watched it since 1996 when it was like on TV. But yeah, it was a useful catch up on who all the main characters are, what all the dynamics are, especially as you say, the kind of less well known bits of the X-Men comics, which for me is basically the bits that haven't been in any of the films. So like Mr. Sinister, things like that. Yeah, but then it kind of grabs where the show left off, which means it's got quite a lot of moving parts, a lot of different storylines, a lot of characters and doing things in different places. But it does kind of all hang together as a complete whole. And each week I found myself really looking forward to, kind of watching the next bit and excited to find out what happens next.
Yeah, this has probably been one of the most talked about series of Marvel have done possibly since WandaVision. I'm sure I'm forgetting one that succeeded, but yeah, it did feel genuinely like a big water cooler moment for the internet. There were a lot of people talking about the latest things that happened, which was fun.
Yeah, I think it helps that it's kind of got the pacing of a Saturday morning cartoon. A lot of these Marvel shows that we discussed in this podcast, especially the ones we hadn't liked so much, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Secret Invasion, things like that, they're quite slow paced, which is some of the problem. They feel like kind of like a movie that's been stretched out a bit and then chopped up into small pieces, partly because that's what Marvel does with the screen adaptations of its famous characters. So yeah, we didn't need 6 hours, 7 hours, whatever, of Falcon and Winter Soldier content when it feels there's about a movie's worth of plot. But this, because it's got the pacing of Saturday morning cartoon, it meant that each episode has a sort of self-contained half an hour of plot, a bit more if it's a 2-parter. But yeah, it drives towards conclusion. It keeps moving. There's something dramatic happens every 10 minutes or so. Yeah, they're always moving the plot forwards. There's always a big twist at the end to be like, what's going to happen next week? And you're like, oh my god, there are 2 genes now. Yeah. Or oh my god, Cable's just appeared. From the future. Yeah. There's it's kind of basic stuff. But there's also things that Saturday morning cartoons had to do well because they needed to hold children's attention. And some of the things that maybe has been forgotten a bit or overlooked by Marvel, which is why there's been a lukewarm reaction to some of their shows. But this brings the goods.
Yeah, I think it's done a good job of adapting as a lot of the good adaptations do, taking a lot of what works about the original and, tweaking and advancing other pieces to make it fit the current audience. It's got the slightly more contained storytelling, but also I think it goes a bit more into the emotions of the characters. It spends slightly more time dwelling on stuff, because I watched the original cartoon during lockdown, because I just got Disney Plus, and that was, for me, one of the exciting things on it. I just wanted to hear the theme tune again. And, it's a good show. It's got a lot more in-depth serialized storytelling than a lot of cartoons from that era, but it does just brush past a lot of emotional stuff. It's not here to dwell on the feelings because it knows the kids aren't necessarily into that. They want to get to the next cool bit. Whereas this show is, as I say, aimed at teens who are a lot more here for the feels and especially the sort of big, intense, operatic feels.
Yeah, I think they're kind of making this relevant for a new generation, and there's probably a lot of people picking it up now. But I think it's one of those things. Again, it's kind of like a cult favorite, or it's consistently popular. That I guess maybe it's because the millennials are so dominant on the chatty parts of the internet, like Twitter, or at least were for a while, and they're kind of shaping the internet culture that younger generations have had. But yeah, there are online people I follow, Gen Zers, who are way too young to probably weren't even born when this show was on TV, who are into it and talking about it. I guess possibly discovering it through lockdown, as you say, because when Disney Plus launched in the UK, before they rolled out all their original content, this and classic Simpsons are one of the big draws that were on the platform. So maybe that's one of the way that the new generations discovered it. This show being good and exciting is probably another one.
Yeah. No, I imagine this will take a lot of people to the original show, and yeah, fair enough. It's interesting in that, yeah, it's quite a strange section of viewers to triangulate for, people who have nostalgia for this specific cartoon, and it's impressive that succeeded. I mean, to be honest, I suspect if you've just seen a couple of X-Men movies, or have a bit of culturally osmosized knowledge of the X-Men, you can probably follow it, just about. But yeah, nonetheless, it's impressively specific, and it's impressive that it works.
Yeah. I think they do a good job of kind of making it possibly more aimed at adult audiences, you say. Or people like us who watched the show when we were young and are now watching this follow-up, having aged quite a bit while the show was off. I do like the fact that like it is still set in 1997, as if it was just like the next year in the show, even though the better part of 20 years has gone by. 30 years. Sorry,
yeah. Special shout out to episode 5, which is probably the high point of the series so far, and did really build to an absolutely devastating emotional climax. I was basically just sitting there slack-jawed watching that by the end. I'm not sure I'd describe most of the show as adult content. I think it's just, elevated teen content. But the on-camera genocide at the end of episode 5, I don't know if you could do in live action without making one of the bleakest things in existence.
Yeah, that was very emotionally hard-hitting. Yeah, and it felt real. It felt like, you were watching an actual genocide because you become emotionally invested and captured in the world of the show, but also because of the parallels we discussed before with X-Men, how it's based on concepts of social justice and civil rights, the metaphor of these group of people who are different from everyone else, who are feared and abused by society, and they created this little island, Genosha, a physical island, but also a kind of an island of safety that gets devastated by the rest of the world. It does remind you of times that's happened in real life, from things like the Tulsa massacre.
Yeah, I think the showrunner has said that it was, for him at least, partly inspired by the Pulse nightclub massacre.
Yeah, that's another tragedy that they're riffing on, and it gives the kind of weight and seriousness to the show. They even kill off a main character in that, so it gives it a real emotional punch from the main characters, because not only is it bad for their kind, it's they personally lose someone. Also, a mistake a lot of shows make. This tragic thing happened. Yeah, but all the main characters, they made it through fine because we need them for the next episode. But actually, first of all, convincing you that quite a few main characters had died, revealing that a few had survived, but some stayed dead. And I really thought they might unwind it with some kind of time travel thing, but no, the horrible massacre remains part of the story.
Yeah, I don't know, it's X-Men, it's comics. I'm not entirely convinced that he won't eventually reappear, but they've left it standing for a decent amount of time.
Yeah, it really reinforces the kind of serious themes of the show about prejudice, acceptance, tolerance. So, the kind of severe backlashes that can come when the rest of society gets together in its fear and anger and decides to stamp on a bit of it.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing this show does in general is it does foreground as you say, the social justice metaphor a lot more than the 90s cartoon did. The 90s cartoon did it in very broad strokes. Here, there's a little bit, at least, of specific, modern social justice discourse. I think there's a bit in the first episode where Sunspot defends himself to some of the usual racist humans who turn up by shouting, "But I'm one of the good ones," or something. And yeah, there's a lot of touching on actual modern social justice discourse, despite it being set in the 90s.
Yes, there's a character that has to come out to their mum or their family as a mutant. The family are at first, "Oh, we accept you, we love you," but also, we're going to keep this quiet because of, our public image. There's obviously this year debates between Magneto and Xavier about putting forward the Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King angles. There are people like Bastion who are come across as a sort of kind of hate monger who just wants to massacre the people that he's afraid of, and it has the power to do it. They're pressing all the kind of buttons for the discourse around this issue and kind of, doing what X-Men does, which is packaging these debates into, the accessible form of a superhero adventure.
Yeah, it sets the bar impressively high for the eventual live-action X-Men film, which I'm sure they're currently trying to make. Yeah, I'm interested to see if they will go quite as explicit with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right by saying this is definitely one of the best X-Men adaptations we've had for a long time, if not ever. Those Bryan Singer films were very good, especially the second one, were very entertaining. bit of a sort of troubled time for the old X-Men since. Though there's been some films that have been entertaining, like X-Men First Class or Days of Future Past. Even then, they're not as good as this, even though they are entertaining films.
Yeah, no, I think this has a fair stake for best X-Men adaptation. It might not be the best, but it certainly has a place up there. So yeah, if you haven't watched this and you like the X-Men, then do watch it. It's really good. I mean, as Alistair said, you can probably find a video summary if you don't want to watch 5 seasons of a 90s cartoon before it.
Yeah, well, I watched a YouTube video that I found that was every episode of the classic series summarized in 37 minutes. So we just kind of went through like season 1, this is what happened. So yeah, I'll tweet that from the MFV account. It's on the internet. I mean, you can just search on YouTube. I'm sure there are other summaries. I think that having that primer helped me a lot because yeah, there are people I'd forgotten. Characters like Mr. Sinister, who's in this as well. Yeah, other things like that. And Bishop, a character I'm not so familiar with, who's a main character in this.
Yeah, Bishop is a big example of a character who was a much bigger deal in the 90s than he is now. He has slightly faded a bit. Probably not helped by the fact that he and Cable were around at the same time, and ultimately perhaps only one grizzled freedom fighter from the future could go on to become a big deal, and Bishop seems to have lost out to Cable.
Yeah, it's a shame. I do like how they've sort of jigged the core cast around a bit, partly to put more people of colour in the role. I think Bishop's given a larger role here because Storm's not the only person of colour.
Well, yeah, they've introduced Sunspots, they've given Morph a bigger role, they've moved things around a bit, they've brought in Nightcrawler.
Yeah, he gets a little bit in the opening credits.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, the sort of thing that makes a good show by itself, but it is quite nice how every episode, or a lot of episodes, they rejig the opening credits slightly to reflect the current X-Men lineup. Like after an unnamed major character dies midway through the series, he does disappear from the credits.
Yeah, there's a few episodes that don't have Magneto in them, and he doesn't appear in the opening credits for those ones. And there's a few episodes that don't have Professor X in them at the beginning when they're doing the whole plot line of he's died before obviously he's inevitably resurrected. He's not in the opening credits for those as well. So yeah, those are little things that like fans love just to spot. Which they're kind of like the cherry on top of the cake. The cake has to be good to enjoy the show, but if the cake's good, then you can also appreciate the little nice cherry on top.
Well, yeah, it doesn't make the show good by itself, but it combines with everything else to create the image of a show that people actually give a shit about. It hasn't just been shat out as a nostalgia cash-in. They've actually tried to make a good X-Men show.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Yeah, but there are all these other nice little bits to it as well.
So yeah, unexpectedly, this was very good and may well be headed for the old top 10 TV list. Fair play.
Finally, this episode we will be discussing Fallout, a new TV show based on the popular video game series. Set 200 years after the bombs dropped on 1950s America, the show takes place in a radioactive wasteland populated by bandits, ghouls, armoured knights in machine suits, and all sorts of dangerous things. The show follows Lucy, who lives in an underground vault, protected from the horrors of the surface. She must venture out to the surface when her dad is kidnapped by raiders. Once there, she meets Squire Maximus, who's pretending to be a knight after his knight has been killed, and the ghoul Cooper Howard, who was once a Hollywood film star before the bombs fell, and now knows a dark secret about this world. We've seen the complete first season of this show on Amazon Prime. Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I thought this was very well made and enjoyable fundamentally. I liked their vision of a dystopian world. They've got a lot of good actors in it, especially Walton Goggins playing the ghoul, Cooper Howard, but a lot of other good people as well. It's bright, it's colourful, it's very watchable. Apart from a few maybe slightly sluggish bits, it's mostly quite well plotted and propulsive. The characters are there. I felt it kind of slightly plateaued for me at good rather than great. I kept waiting for the really, really interesting or exciting twist or world building bit or like a moving character arc that would make me really fall in love with it. And that never quite came for me, to be honest. So yeah, it's good rather than great, but it is very good.
Yeah, I enjoyed this as I watched it. It's got quite an interesting world of all the things going on. I guess all the sort of bits of lore and things they've imported from the video game. I did feel that I just wasn't hugely invested in the characters. I just thought, Lucy possibly lacks a bit of personality. She's just a kind of, a naive young woman who ventures out into the world, and kind of has to, basically learn that the world's not all sweetness and bubblegum and is actually really nasty. The other characters, Maximus being, again, is sort of a guy on a sort of bit of a hero's journey, fairly standard stuff. Obviously, a badass bounty hunter with like a big, powerful gun. is a kind of good scene-stealing character. I feel we've seen something like this, from Mandalorian. Really gets across the, I think, appeal of the Boba Fett character from Star Wars to a lot of people. Obviously, sadly let down by that rubbish show they made about Boba Fett. But yeah, it just felt a bit generic in terms of some of the characterization, which stopped me really getting deeply invested. But yeah, there was always something entertaining happening that kept me watching along.
Yeah, but I've seen a few sort of neo-Western shows over the last few years. I've seen a few dystopian shows, in terms of Westerns. There's like Justified, Westworld, Mandalorian, as you say, that rubbish Boba Fett show. And dystopian-wise, just within the last year, we've seen The Last of Us and Silo. This is, for the record, probably more entertaining than Silo, but not anywhere near as good as The Last of Us. Because, again, over The Last of Us, if anything, had a slightly more generic world. It just had better characters in it.
Yeah, that's kind of the crucial difference. It's the characters that you kind of get invested in. And then the character's journey and the kind of emotional surprises along the way and twists and turns. Whereas, the characters were a bit simpler. And also there wasn't like a surprising emotional direction they shot off in. There was, the naive girl gets tough. The knight guy becomes disillusioned. The badass chiseled bounty hunter becomes, shows some humanity. There wasn't like, many surprises. Yeah, it turns out that the lovely kind of 1950s underground vault world hides a dark secret. Things like that. Yeah,
that is one of the problems, isn't it? Like, it was telegraphed very heavily from quite early on that, there would be a dark side to the vaults, and Vault Tech were probably fairly evil. Vault Tech, the company who made the vaults. And they basically spent the whole season getting to the point where they would reveal, in a couple of twists and flashbacks, exactly what the dark side of the vaults was and exactly how Vault Tech were evil. And then it kind of ended. That's not really quite enough. There's not really a second thing there. If anything, it felt like it was on the verge of being one of those shows, which I feel like we got a bit more a few years ago, where it felt like the first season was almost a prequel, or at least the first season was the content that should have been in about the first 3 or 4 episodes, and there should have then been more.
Yeah, just sort of, basically introducing the world. I think it's the world is that what most people are invested in. Yeah, because I guess from the video game and things like that, because I don't think they're doing a direct adaptation of one of the video games. I mean, that's one of the reasons why people like The Last of Us. Again, it's a post-apocalyptic video game adaptation, but they took literally the plot of The Last of Us and put it in the TV show, and it's a good plot. Whereas here, they've come up with their own characters and plot, I believe, and it's kind of not as engaging as the world, which is what people love, I guess, the fans of this popular video games series, which is one of the big sort of geek culture phenomenons that's passed me by. I've never actually played a Fallout game.
I do have a couple of them sitting in my Steam account, but no, I've never actually played one. So no foreknowledge here, but I do gather the same as you. Yes, this is not a direct adaptation of a game. It's another story set within the world of the games. Yeah, there are probably a lot of Easter eggs I'm missing. But, the world building is good. I do understand everything that's going on. I just wish the story taking place within it, and as you say, the characters maybe had a bit more to them.
Yeah, that is, I guess, the strike against it. The moments of humour are quite good. It's not so po-faced a post-apocalyptic kind of, everything's bad since we destroyed society with massive bombs. There are actually quite a bit of humour, a few kind of gory bits that are kind of with some sort of slapstick violence, some quite unpleasant monsters. So yeah, those I kind of quite like the tonal humour of it.
Yeah, no, it's a well-managed tone, and Walton Goggins is extremely good, especially. He was the main antagonist in all 6 seasons of Justified, so I was already a fan, but he is extremely good here as well, even though in the present-day set stuff, he is acting through a thick layer of makeup. Turns out he's good enough to do that.
Yeah, and he's a good character, and yeah, he definitely seems to be the breakout star of this, or the one that he's getting the most attention. I suppose he's already broken out if he's been the star of a show already. But yeah, he's the one that most people are talking about and seems to be most focused on. I did like that they had Carl McLachlan playing the father that she's searching for. Like, it's a big fan of like Twin Peaks and David Lynch's stuff. I feel like getting Carl McLachlan is a sign that, kind of your audience and know the sort of things they like to nod towards. Because it could have just been any relatively well-known actor. But yeah, there's always something special about seeing Carl McLachlan in something.
Yeah, his storyline, much like, a lot of it, like I said a second ago, I was like, oh, it's finished just as it's getting going. Oh, well.
Yeah, I believe, thanks to the inevitable post-credit bits, that he'll have a bigger role in the second season when they go to New Vegas, which I believe is one of the video games. So, so it finishes with a shot of Las Vegas.
Yeah, pretty much. They've done the thing where you get some decent acting even on the smaller parts. We saw, was it Michael Emerson as the guy in the second or third episode who meets the heroine and has a bad time?
Yeah. There's some like unusual twists and things like that. Like, yeah, he's a sort of relatively well-known actor. You think is going to play like
A bigger role.
a bigger role, and then is killed off. So spoilers, but it's quite early on. After him playing a sort of villain in Lost. Yeah, one of the main villains in Lost, or villain to hero character in Lost, playing one of the main characters in Person of Interest. He's kind of done quite a bit of TV stuff. So I thought he was going to be like a running main character, but that was a quite surprising twist. Although following that, Lucy, sweet innocent lovely Lucy, surprisingly quickly gets involved in corpse mutilation, which was a bit of a character swing.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the plot progression of Lucy becoming steadily more hard-bitten and adjusted to violence is, I guess, inevitable, because that's what happens in these shows. But she did make some quite early big jumps.
Yeah, it's kind of justified her to like she'll do anything to save her dad, which I suppose is to build up to the point when you find out that her dad is a villain as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually some similar moments in Love Lies Bleeding with the Kristen Stewart character, but the difference is they feel like carefully modulated reveals about the character, and this feels a bit less like that.
Yeah, because this is just a little bit more generic. I mean, yeah, the Love Lies Bleeding is a good comparison. It's another kind of, lawless wasteland type of film. Fallout just a little bit more lawless. But Love Lies Bleeding, they could have done a much more generic film that was just kind of, small town baddies, crimes and guns. But they found a way to make it interesting, unusual, surprising twists, visual flair. The thing with this is they just made it a little bit just too generic, post-apocalyptic sci-fi. I mean, there's visual flair in the designs. Again, probably taking the video game, the unusual like art direction of it, which makes it different from just another post-bombs being dropped TV show. And I do like the kind of 50s aesthetic running through it. Yeah, atom punk type of thing with kind of like, the robots that look like they're from the 1950s and like, the whole kind of 50s design things, the big suits of armor that kind of have got a sort of Chevrolet type thing going on with them. And yeah, and obviously the main way that's done is through the music and some film references. Like, Walter Goggins' character, Cooper Howard, is a sort of classic Hollywood Western action star from the Hollywood era, studio system era. And obviously there's a lot of 50s music deployed. Personally, I can't stand 50s music, so it's quite annoying, but I get the vibe they're going for.
I might be wrong, but have I heard that sort of music being deployed in a sinister way quite a lot in the last few years?
Yeah.
It's well enough done here, but it's starting to feel a bit rote.
Yeah, and I did feel the show leaned in too much to the beat, which they did quite a few times, of basically something really awful and violent happening to a soundtrack of saccharine 50s music. It's all very, to use a technical film term, contrapuntal, which is when, the music or something like that is against the visuals of what you're seeing. Best example of this, Reservoir Dogs, the infamous ear being sliced off scene to the tune of Stuck in the Middle with You. That's probably the best example. They do this quite a lot here, of the horrible people being massacred, blood, guts and violence, whilst some very, very saccharine 50s music plays. Possibly overindulged as a beat.
Yeah, I'd possibly we may have James Gunn to blame for the current wave of contrapunting in films, because I think there was a lot of, not with 50s music, but a lot of grim violence set to jaunty pop music in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes, I think you're right about that. Yeah. Fallout, I think this is very much a thing from the video game, that like it's got a soundtrack of 50s classics. I mean, I think they've written some original ones for this, by the sounds of it, or they are written for the video games that they've used in this. But yeah, I don't know. Not my favourite style of music, not my favourite period of Hollywood history, but I do like the atom punk aesthetic. It's nice to see people doing this kind of interesting sci-fi art direction that riffs on history that isn't steampunk, the most famous example of this. The lesser known atom punk is having its moment. Fallout is probably the most famous atom punk thing ever created, with the possible only other exception of the Jetsons.
Yeah, I mean, possibly almost similar to Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. There's a lot of, Amazon money here being deployed to create an expensive-looking world, and they have succeeded. It does look very good. It does have a very strong aesthetic. But again, similar to the Rings of Power, maybe should have fuddled a bit more of that money into the writing.
Yeah, character and drama, where it's lacking. But I did, I don't know, got to the end of the whole thing, entertaining enough.
Yeah, I didn't hate it, but I suspect within a month or two, I would have mostly forgotten it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine this will appear on the worst show of the year. To say it was the worst show of the year is just unfair on this show that is perfectly entertaining. I think it's unlikely to trouble the current top 5.
But yeah, as somebody who does a top 10, it's not getting in there either. Okay, and that is all for Moderate Fantasy Violence for this fortnight. Thank you very much for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, then why not go to our website at moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can see a load of articles, a load of old episodes, and a load of purple. And if you particularly enjoyed all of that, then please leave us a review on your podcast application of choice. 5 stars, please. Thank you.
If you want more from us, then you can follow us on Twitter or Blue Sky by searching for MFV Podcast. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. If you want more from me, you can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky and Instagram by searching for Alistair Ball. You can get more of my writing at redtrainblog.com or find my theatre reviews at Everything Theatre.
And you can get more from me as Nick Bryan on Blue Sky, NickMB on Twitter, or nickbryan.com on the general internet, or various other applications as well. And I'm also currently doing a Kickstarter for The Collected Letters of Courier Z, my sci-fi crime adaptation about a future space post-woman turning to the underworld. If that interests you, we have now reached our funding target, so if you back now, then you can just buy the comic. Imagine life being that simple. And yep, other than that, we'll be back in 2 weeks. I think the day before my Kickstarter finishes, actually, when we will be covering the new Mad Max prequel film Furiosa and the Sandman spin-off, or sort of semi-spin-off. We'll work it out once we've seen it. Dead Boy Detectives. See you for that in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.